taxes, and Watford tackling the manager and hiring a new one straight away. Hello and welcome to the Honest Football Podcast managerial special. I'm Craig Savage and with me as always is Mr. Daniel Cody. Yeah, you're not surprised yet. Watford have sacked Rob Edwards and have hired Slaven Bilic as the new head coach on an 18-month contract. How long those 18 months he'll get, we'll discuss that in a second. Yeah, he replaces Rob Edwards and alongside his assistant Richie Kyle. They have left Vicarage Road. In that statement, as with all decisions taken by the board, I believe a change to be the best interest of the club, said the owner, Mr. Pozzo. We felt Rob had enough time to show us the identity of his team. However, performances haven't reflected our hopes and ambitions. Now we must move forward, and in Slaven Bilic, we have secured the services of an experienced coach who's recently experienced a promotion to the Premier League. Bilic's most recent work in this country was to guide West Brom to promotion in the 2019-2020 season. Right, let's start off with Rob Edwards. He's gone, lasted 10 league games and one obviously in the cup. He had enough time apparently.
It's a bizarre statement, isn't it? And obviously that came after the initial statement. That was in the Bilic statement. The one confirming he was sacked was 3 lines, which is very bizarre. And it had been coming the last couple of games because there were bits of talking behind the scenes and we sort of knew that we were expecting this pressure to come. And obviously when we did the Rob Edwards special back in May, we said this was probably going to happen. And I know that, and I've been watching some of them back the last hour because it's quite amusing. The Watford board, particularly Scott Duxbury at the time, talking a lot about we need to get our culture back. We need to change our trajectory and fix the errors of recent years. And we all assumed, and Watford fans are guilty of it, as are we, for assuming that meant a longer term project and giving someone more time. But what they actually meant is that they'd given Roy Hodgson too long, and only 10 games is what they were going to give now. So obviously Rob Edwards hasn't been given as long, and now we're on to Slaven Bilic, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the signs were good early under Rob Edwards. They looked a bit more compact after a poor defensive record at the end of last season. I mean, they're 1 point off the playoff, for goodness sake. After 10 league games, nearly a whole team of players came into the club in the summer window, over a team left, including a couple of stars after the season started, most namely Emmanuel Dennis. And if it was any other club, it would be a surprise. Let's be honest. If it was any other club, it'd be a surprise. With Watford, it's not. The fans aren't surprised. We're not surprised. And I know that we'll immediately get some of the bias comments because we've got a Luton badge behind us and we are from Luton. But we try to be fair in these. I feel we were in the Rob Edwards one, and we're back in the same vicious cycle. We knew that Watford would probably be the first club we did a second manager special on this year, and it's a harsh sacking, but it's not unexpected. It never is anymore.
No, and just a quick stat. Since during lockdown, the first lockdown in 2020, this is our Watford's 8th manager. But at the end of the day, 8 managers in 2.5 years is ridiculous. And once again, it just proves that Watford are a complete laughingstock.
Well, this is the thing. And even though they are our rivals, I don't actually wish it on anyone or any set of fans, is that it has almost become a bit of a running joke now. And it was fine for the first few years because Watford fans, and rightly so, would turn around and say, yeah, but it's working. They were getting results, but that's stopped a bit now. And while I think the manager they've actually appointed, or the head coach they've appointed, is a very good one, I'm concerned about how long he's going to get. It is getting silly now, and some of the decisions have been questionable. But a lot of the Watford fans were actually spot on in the summer when we did the Rob Edwards one, when we did the pre-season predictions in the Championship. And they said the biggest problem behind all of this is the recruitment the last 2 or 3 years has been largely awful. And the managers are just masking that and trying to paper over cracks, which is fair. The recruitment has been poor. It's been another big turnaround this summer. I actually think the recruitment was a lot better. They had a decent core of a squad come in. We talked about people like Keenan Davis, Hamza Chowdhury into the midfield, a good core of British players that were experienced. I mean, Davis was brilliant for Forest last year. And add to that a little sprinkling of gold dust that you get from Ismaila Sarr and João Pedro. The signs were going to be good. And in the last game, ironically, against Sunderland, while defensive frailties popped up again, they actually played really well in spells. So it's a little bit surprising, the timing of it. I did think Rob Edwards was going to get to the World Cup, but it boils down to the same thing. You can never, ever be surprised anymore. And I do actually feel for Watford fans a bit, even as a Luton fan.
I feel, obviously, we feel for Rod Edwards because he's just been given a big job and he hasn't achieved anything. And that's not disrespectful because it's only been 10, 11 games. So where do you see him going from here?
I'll be honest, I don't think having a short stint at Watford and losing your job does anything to your stock now, really. I think if it wasn't for Watford coming along, he probably would have got the chance if he'd started okay at Forest Green at a good League One job. And I think he'll get the same again now. There are obviously some jobs maybe further down the Championship that possibly suit him at the moment. I'm looking at a Rotherham as an example, thinking of Paul Warne, who's just gone. So he could feature in another manager special soon. But I don't think it harms his stock too much, to be honest. He's a good young coach, did work with the England youth setups. And to be fair to him, he's not been given time to prove himself in this job. And in the other ones, he's always done really well. So in his two longer stints, Forest Green, he did a brilliant job last year, won the title. It's on his CV from 4 or 5 months ago. I don't think it harms him too much.
Right, moving on. Slaven Bilic is now in charge, new head coach. As I said in the statement, he obviously got that experience in the Championship, took West Brom up automatically. Obviously, this appointment's been coming for the international window.
Yeah, it was obviously pre-planned because it was announced within 15 minutes of Rob Edwards going. But look, if you were looking for a person for the job to get you out the Championship that's available now, you'd do very well to find a better candidate than Slaven Bilic. In fairness, it's a very good appointment. He'll get results. He got West Brom promoted. He was maybe harshly treated there afterwards as well. But the issue comes, Craig, is he going to get the season? And I know it sounds ridiculous, but Rob Edwards started well, a few games without a win, and suddenly he's gone. Is the same going to happen to Bilic? I just don't know what to predict anymore. On the face of it, it's a brilliant appointment. It seems like one that they perhaps could have gone for in the summer because he's been out of work, but the decision...
Do you think that that's because Watford have know what they actually want to achieve? The only thing they want to achieve is get back into the Premier League. And that's obviously understandable, like any other team that gets relegated from the Premier League. But there is no, deep down, there's no core of what they actually really want. No style of how they want to, like, it always seems to be a different style with different coaches. Like Rob Edwards had a style, Roy Hodgson had a style, Nigel Pearson had a style, Claudio Ranieri had a style, Xisco had a style, Ivic had a style, and they're all different styles completely. But there's no real deep core of what actually Watford want. There's no foundations at Watford at the moment.
No, I think that's pretty fair. I think most Watford fans wouldn't argue with that. And it goes back to what a lot of them were saying in the summer. It was botched recruitment for years that was a little bit haphazard and all over the place. As you mentioned, managerial appointments that vastly differ in style and the way they want to play and their backgrounds and the way they achieve success. And I mean, I maintain it, and I said it at the time, I think sacking Xisco was a huge mistake. We were both proven wrong by him. I thought he was starting to build a good team. They were outside the relegation zone in the Premier League when he got sacked. It's actually at a similar time of the season to Rob Edwards here in the Championship.
So it's September, February, summer, September, February. So it's that constant cycle of Watford.
But it was just a shame for them because I thought Xisco was an excellent coach. And it was the first time for a little while, probably a year and a half or so, they had an identity. And that again seems to be getting muddied a bit. There was so much talk, as we mentioned earlier, about the long-term project in the summer and finding the roots again, building a core, letting a manager build a style and understanding what Watford were again. And there's got to be a point where, as a football fan, forget club rivalries, forget anything else, as a football fan, where you think, all right, this is getting a bit silly now. And I do worry for Watford if the Slaven Bilic one isn't given time, because he is a great manager and he will be the man to get them up. If he can't do it, I don't see many that can. But will he be given that time? It's the question that nobody knows the answer to.
They have to give Bilic time, but knowing Watford, I don't think he will.
It's my biggest worry from a prediction point of view. If you remember in the summer, I actually predicted they'd have a pretty poor start under Rob Edwards, which it hasn't been that poor, in all honesty.
It's the Championship.
Yeah.
It's extremely tight.
And they've played a lot of the top teams already. It's got to be said. They didn't have the best run of fixtures at the start of the season. They played my champions in waiting, Sheffield United. They played West Brom. They played Burnley. I'm going down a bit further. They've played QPR. They've played Middlesbrough. They've played Blackburn. Loads of teams that were in the top half last year. They've had a really tough start on paper, and they're right in the mix. They've had loads of new players come in, and they were adapting okay. The problem for Slaven Bilic is he's got his first game's against a new manager in his second or third home game in Alex Neil at Stoke, then a couple of possibly winnable games on paper. Then you're going into a week against a Norwich side that haven't had much change and look very efficient. Millwall away is always a test, and then the derby, obviously. So we're talking about 3 games that are going to be very tricky in the space of a week, and 3 very high octane games. So for Slaven Bilic, look, there is no doubt it's a brilliant appointment. And I think it's what will potentially keep the Watford fans on side, is that it is an upgrade of manager on CV. There's no doubt in that. But he's got to be given the season. They've got to accept if there's 5 or 6 bad games, or we're just going to be back in this position by the World Cup again, because we've got another, 10 games now to the World Cup. So potentially, we could be in exactly the same position. What if Bilic only gets 14 points from his next 10 games? Watford will still be 7th or 8th. Is he going to go as well? It's a very, very uncertain situation, but I'd like to hope that he's going to get the season now, surely, because of what he did at West Brom.
There's no guarantees. And I generally think that's a good appointment, to be fair.
That's a great appointment.
Of all the bashing I've just been doing, I think it's actually a very good appointment, but it's more of the, I trust Bilic, I don't trust behind the scenes. And you haven't, since they arrived, you can't trust them. You cannot possibly trust them. Yeah, you've had the yo-yo of up and down, like Premier League and back in Championship, Premier League, Championship, and then FA Cup final. But it's as I said, there's no core. Like, with certain clubs, you know what they're doing. You know how their structure is behind the scenes, and you know how the team wants to play, and go from there. I can't see. It's throwing stuff into a wall and see if it sticks. Bilic, only 18 months. Does he get the 18 months?
Probably not. I mean, let's be honest.
No,
it would be bold to predict.
I don't think so.
I think, just to answer a quick question that you haven't asked yet, but I know you would have, is the reason he's getting 18 months and Rob Edwards got 3 years is because he'll be on at least double the wage, which is why it's a shorter contract. But what I would say on the Bilic front is I still stick by my prediction now that they've appointed a good manager after an average start, and he will get them into the playoffs, and they've got a good chance of going up, because outside the top 2, I don't think there's any great sides in the Championship this year or any standout sides. So
not yet.
It is up for grabs. It is up for grabs early doors. But if he takes them up, he won't last next season. We know that because no Watford manager does. And Xisco didn't last this year after producing a very decent start. And if they stay down, if he isn't top of the league after 4 or 5 games next year, and if he doesn't get sacked at the end of the year, then I don't see him surviving past that. So I actually think they've got a better chance of going up now with him, but he won't see out the 18 months. There's no way he's there at the end of next season. I mean, you can't predict it. Even if it does end up happening, no sane fan can predict that.
Will there be a pundit come November for ITV?
Not quite that quickly.
We need Slaven back on ITV punditry for the World Cup. He's always good at that. Right, that is our thoughts on the sacking of Rob Edwards and the hiring of Slaven Bilic at Watford. Let us know in the comments how you feel about this whole situation, and give us your prediction how Slaven Bilic will do at the Hornets. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the On This Football Podcast, and you can follow us on Twitter at On This Football Free. We also got our Championship predictions coming up later in the week. And we'll see you next time.